this is the embroidery that Malcolm was mentioning that hangs at Castle Forbes. And it's really quite a remarkable piece. This is supposed to have been done by Mary, Queen of Scots, and the four Marys, her handmaidens. And so this is the jumping off point for my historical discussion. I thought I'd try a historical discussion today because I've just finished that section of my edit of the House of Forbes, but that's how it looks in Castle Forbes. So that's why I want to go to Clan Forbes and Mary, Queen of Scots. It's complicated. And boys and girls, is it complicated? We were never exactly all on the same side in supporting Mary, Queen of Scots. So I'm going to give you a rundown, kind of a contextual assessment of what the relationship was between House of Forbes and Mary, Queen of Scots. Now, as you probably know, there's a big religious battle going on. Martin Luther had been preaching the rejection of Catholic Church since about 1520. So, as you know, Henry VIII broke from the Catholic Church, and then he also urged his nephew, James V, King of the Scots, to also break with the Catholic Church and recognize his authority. Well, of course, King James declined, and he refused to meet with Henry. In retaliation, Henry launched a series of raids into southern Scotland, trying to force him to reject the Catholic Church. Now, Mary was born to King James V and Queen Mary of Guise-Lorraine, also known as Mary of Guise, in 1542. And since the king died soon after, Queen Mary was underage, and so they appointed a regent, who was James Hamilton's second Earl of Arran. She was crowned at all of 1 year old in 1543. Now, King Henry attempted to block Scotland from an alliance from his enemy of France by uniting the kingdom, and so he proposed marriage of his son, later Edward VI of England, with Mary, the new Queen of the Scots. Now, while the regent, the Earl of Arran, agreed to this union, there are a lot of people opposed to this union. For example, Cardinal David Beaton, spelled Bethune, he was Archbishop of St. Andrews, wrote a denunciation of this alliance with England. And then William, then the Master of Forbes, and later 7th Lord Forbes, joined with other Scottish lords in signing this denunciation called the Secret Bond in 1543. Other signers included George Gordon, 4th Earl of Huntly. Now, you may remember that name from hearing about the feud between Forbeses and the Gordons. At this point, they're on the same side. But as we'll discover, they both flip back and forth. So the Gordons and the Forbeses are on the side of signing the secret bond. As a result, the Parliament rejected the treaty in 1543. King Henry was furious, and so he declared war on Scotland and commenced a series of battles over the next 8 years. These skirmishes were later called the Rough Wooing. That was a coin turned by Sir Walter Scott through his novels, and that's what's become known today when King Henry was attempting to woo Mary, Queen of Scots, through battle. Now, in retaliation for his role in coordinating the rejection of his offer, Archbishop Beaton was assassinated by Norman Leslie, another clan with whom we've had many feuds. He was the Mater of Rothes and William Kilkady of Grange in 1546. Now, it gets kind of complicated because Archbishop Beaton was not only Lord Chancellor of Scotland, but he's also the uncle of Margaret Beaton Forbes of Rires. Now, the Forbes of Rires was related through the Archbishop's brother, who was John Beaton of Corrichie. While Beaton's home was Corrichie Castle, he was also the keeper of James V's Falkland Palace in Fife. Both this and Stirling Castles were the official residences of Mary of Guise after the death of the king. Now, Beaton's daughter was appointed as a companion and then lady-in-waiting to Mary, Queen of Scots. She married Arthur Forbes, 4th Laird of Reres, and became known as Lady Reres. And she was also the aunt of Mary Beaton, another lady-in-waiting, who was also known as one of the Queen's four Marys. Have any of you heard of the four Marys? They're very, very famous in the story of Mary, Queen of Scots. And this may very well have been the origin of the embroidery that we talked about. Now, remember Arthur Forbes, the Laird of Reres. Now, Rather than allying with England, the Scottish regent James Hamilton, the Earl of Arran, agreed to the marriage of the young queen with 3-year-old Francis, son and heir of King Henry II of France. And the Scottish Parliament agreed to it. And they felt that she would be better off in the French court. They were married in 1558 and became rulers of France when Henry II died in 1559. Now, unfortunately, the King Francis died the next year in 1560. I don't know if any of you saw The Reign. That was kind of an interesting historical fiction of this whole period. So the throne went to his brother, King Charles IX, and as Queen of Scots, Mary returned to Scotland in 1561. However, her Protestant subjects were not very happy with having a devoutly Catholic queen. Now, while she was in France, her illegitimate half-brother, James Stuart, first Earl of Moray, ruled as regent. When she returned, he became the chief advisor. He was a staunch Protestant, and he ensured that of the 16 members of the Mary's new Privy Council, only 4 were Catholic, including, George Gordon, 4th Earl of Huntly, who also served as Lord Chancellor. However, Earl of Huntly was really dismayed by Queen Mary's acceptance of Protestants in her Privy Council. So he led a rebellion. So now the Gordons are opposing Mary, Queen of Scots. However, at that time, William's 7th Lord Forbes held much of his state from Earl of Huntly. He supported the Queen, and the Scottish government formally released him from those oaths, and he allowed Lord Forbes to join Clan Fraser, Clan Monroe, Clan Mackenzie, Clan Mackintosh, Clan Mackay, Clan Murray, and Clan Cameron to rally the royalist cause in support of Mary, Queen of Scots, against Huntly, who rallied Clan Gordon and Clan Brodie. That's the first time that Forbeses and the Gordons came into conflict. This resulted in the Battle of Corrichie on October 28th. You can see the memorial stone there with the plaque on the right-hand side. Now, both the Earl of Huntly and his eldest son, Sir John, were among those captured. Huntly was already on horse to be taken to Aberdeen when he suddenly died. Sir John Gordon was taken to Aberdeen and executed 3 days later. Now, this is what was kind of bizarre. They brought the Earl of Huntly's body to Edinburgh and stood him up and had a trial over his treason. Now, the Earl's younger son, 17-year-old Adam Gordon of Auchendown, was captured but was spared. That was not a good thing. If some of you have read about the feud between Forbeses and Gordons, we'll hear more about Adam Gordon. Now, as a reward for his loyalty, Lord Forbes received a charter in 1563 from Queen Mary, promising Huntly's land since they would be held directly by the crown. So now Lord Forbes is supporting Mary, Queen of Scots. Earl of Huntly is dead, and the Gordons are not in favor anymore. That will change. Queen Mary added fuel to the religious fire when she married a well-known Catholic in 1565, her cousin Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley. Now, this prompted her advisor, the Earl of Moray, who was a Stuart. Now, quick side note. You notice that his name is Stuart, whereas the Earl of Moray spelled his name Stewart. Mary, Queen of Scots, changed the spelling when she came back to Stuart, only because the French did not have a W in their alphabet, so she changed the spelling to Stuart. The Stuart, Sewart, was a reflection of the position the Stuarts had as stewards to the Queen. If you know your history, you understand why that was. But it was actually a steward to the king, and then they became kings, and that's how the Stuarts with a W were in power. But until Mary, Queen of Scots, came back from France and started changing the spelling to Stuart. Just a quick note. Now, the Queen gave birth to her son James in 1566, and Darnley, the very next year, died from a very mysterious explosion from a cache of gunpowder. And I'm giving you the highlights. You really got to, there's a whole book about this whole plot with the gunpowder and blowing up. But this is the basic overview. And the person who was involved with that was James Hepburn, the fourth Earl of Bothwell, who was suspected of planning the murder. So Lord Darnley's father, Matthew Stewart, with a W, formally accused Bothwell of murdering his son. However, he could provide no proof, and the jury of Scottish peers acquitted Bothwell. And John, Master of Forbes and son of William VII, Lord Forbes, was among those people on the jury. Very interesting. Now, 3 weeks later, Bothwell received a formal annulment to his marriage of his wife of 1 year, Lady Jean Gordon. You can tell it's a family arrangement. She was the daughter of the Scottish Chandler, George Gordon, 5th Earl. Remember, his father, the 4th Earl, had died as a result of the Battle of Corrichie. So he divorced Jean Gordon and married Mary, Queen of Scots. 26 nobles were so outraged that she married the accused murderer of Darnley that they joined with the Earl of Moray in rebelling against her in 1565. These Confederate lords included William VII, Lord Forbes, so now he's opposed to Queen Mary. These lords accused Mary of being an adulteress and imprisoned her in Loch Leven Castle. On July 24th, she was forced to abdicate in favor of her 1-year-old son, James. And he was going to be raised Protestant. Mary was first imprisoned in Scotland, but escaped to England in 1568. She thought that Queen Elizabeth would support her, but she did not. She imprisoned her. Now, William VII, Lord Forbes, supported the Earl of Moray and young James VI. However, he joined with 21 other Scottish peers to sign a letter to Queen Elizabeth of England requesting that Mary be released from prison. He again signed a letter in 1570 encouraging her to release Mary. He said, as you can see here, "We have recourse to your majesty as the princess of Christendom, who has the best means and as we think should have the best will to quench this heat begun among us before it burst out into a flame which may set both countries on fire." There is very prophetic. On January 23rd, 1570, James Hamilton assassinated Moray. And 3 years later, John Wood, Moray's secretary, was assassinated by, guess who? Arthur Forbes, 4th of Reres, and his 2 sons, John and Arthur. So the Reres family was really still supporting Mary, Queen of Scots, even though clan chief William VII Lord had supported James, but was also encouraging the release of Queen Mary. That's not all the murders going on. The next regent was Matthew Stewart, another Stewart, 4th Earl of Lennox. However, George Gordon, 5th Earl of Huntly, commanded a raid on Stirling Castle, resulting in the death of Lennox. And John Erskine was appointed as the new regent. Now, even though Lord Forbes had encouraged the release of Queen Mary, he was still a supporter of the government of young King James VI. He was shocked by Huntly's raid on Stirling Castle and the murder of the regent. So, on October 10th, the Forbeses gathered to, quote, "to enterprise something against the Gordons and the rest of the Queen's favorers in these parts." And that's what really kicked off the feud between the Gordons and the Forbeses. It was all based on this religious conflagration between the Protestants and the Catholics. So they went after the Gordons, and what happened from that, you may well know about the Gordon feud with the Forbeses. This kicked off a conflagration with handled by Adam Gordon of Ashendam. Remember, he was spared at the Battle of Corrichie. He assembled a force and they ambushed Forbeses at Tilliangus. And contemporary reports that Gordons killed 36 Forbeses, including Lord Forbes' stepbrother, who was Black Arthur Forbes, and another 100 prisoners, including a younger son of Lord Forbes. Now, this led to the Battle of Crabstane on November 1571, and the burning of Corgarth Castle, and the murder of Margaret Campbell Forbes, wife of John Forbes of Toohey. Now, you can read all about this on the Forbes website in much more detail, but I wanted to give you a sense of all this was touched off because of the religious controversy and because of Mary Queen of Scots being a Catholic in a Protestant government. Now, they signed the Pacification of Perth in 1573, which was intended to end the war between the Roman Catholic supporters of Mary Queen of Scots and the Protestant lords who had forced her abdication. Now, eventually, Lord Forbes received some compensation from the government for the loss he suffered, some of whom were banished to France. However, it did not end well, of course, for Mary, Queen of Scots. She continued to correspond with many of her supporters, and she was accused of these many plots against Queen Elizabeth and was executed for treason on February 8, 1587. That is a summary of Clan Forbes and Mary, Queen of Scots. It's complicated.